After 2 years of marriage, she's still a virgin. Sarah's CEO wants her and gets a one-night stand. Rashish, welcome to my beautiful family friends. In the name of love, light, and endless blessings, may your hearts always be filled with warmth, your souls with peace, and your lives with love. May every dream you hold dear come true, and may kindness, joy, and success follow you wherever you go. I pray that happiness never leaves your doorstep, and that you always find love in the moments that matter the most. May this story bring you closer to the magic of love, the depth of emotions, and the beauty of a heart that never gives up. Dear family, I am working really hard every day to bring you the most beautiful, heart-touching love stories, pouring my heart and soul into every word. But I've noticed that views are going down day by day, and it's truly disheartening. I am here only because of your love and support, and I need your help, now more than ever. If you enjoy my stories, please support me by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It means the world to me, and it will help me continue writing for you. Tell your friends and loved ones about these stories, and let's grow this beautiful family together. Also, don't forget to comment below and let me know what today's story was about, your thoughts, your favorite moments, and how it made you feel. I love reading your comments and connecting with you all. Now, without further ado, let's begin today's story. A tale of love, passion, and the kind of romance that stays in your heart forever. Reflection. The dim glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room, the silence pressing down on her like a weight she could no longer bear. Her deep brown eyes, once filled with hope and innocence, now seemed hollow, empty, devoid of the warmth they once carried. Her delicate fingers brushed over the smooth, cold surface of the vanity table, as if searching for something, anything that would anchor her in a life that felt like a never-ending, dreamless void. 2 years. 2 years of a marriage that was nothing more than an illusion. 2 years of silence, of forced smiles in public, of sleeping alone in a bed meant for two. 2 years of being a wife in name only, bound by a piece of paper but never by love. Nathan Ellington had never truly wanted her. Not in the way a husband should want his wife. Not in the way Sarah had once yearned to be wanted. She had married him young, naive, and foolishly hopeful. She had believed in love, in fairy tales, in the promises that a wedding band should bring. But reality had been nothing like the stories she had clung to. The moment the wedding ended, the moment they returned to their shared house, Nathan's indifference became clear. He never reached for her, never touched her, never whispered sweet nothings in the stillness of the night. His affection, if there had ever been any, had withered before it could even bloom. Sarah had spent every night in that cold, empty bed waiting for him to look at her, to see her, to want her, but he never did. Her fingers trembled as they curled into the soft fabric of her nightgown, her knuckles whitening as she clung to the material. She had tried to be patient. She had tried to be the perfect wife, waiting, hoping that one day he would come to her. That one day he would press her against him, kiss her, crave her. But that day never came. Her virginity remained untouched, a cruel reminder of how unwanted she was in her own marriage. The bed behind her remained as pristine as it had been on their wedding night, a bed she had slept in alone for 2 years, a bed where she had whispered her silent prayers, wondering what she had done wrong. Wondering if she was not beautiful enough, not desirable enough, not worthy of being loved. Nathan had never said the words outright, but his actions, his cold, distant stares, his clipped, dismissive words had spoken louder than any rejection ever could. "You're just my wife on paper, Sarah. Don't expect more." The memory of his voice, sharp and unfeeling, sent a deep ache slicing through her chest. She had replayed those words in her mind too many times to count. She had been nothing more than a duty to him, a responsibility he had no intention of fulfilling. Her heart clenched painfully at the realization. This wasn't a marriage. This was a prison sentence. She bit her lower lip, suppressing the tears that burned behind her eyes. She had spent years trying to be what Nathan wanted, trying to mold herself into something he could desire. But no matter what she did, she was invisible to him. And now she had grown tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of being unloved. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, sending shivers down her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at her own reflection with something she hadn't felt in years: resentment. Why had she allowed this? Why had she let herself be caged in a loveless marriage, waiting for a man who would never come to her? She had wasted 2 years of her life in an illusion, living as a stranger in her own home, lying beside a man who had never touched her, who had never once shown her even a hint of passion. Sarah closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to calm the storm raging within her, but it was no use. The longing, the pain, the emptiness, it was suffocating her. She was only 24, yet she felt as if her life had already passed her by, as if she had been robbed of something precious, something sacred. And then, like a whisper in the dark, a name surfaced in her mind: Lucas Blackwood. Her breath hitched, and her fingers instinctively gripped the edge of the vanity table. Lucas Blackwood, her husband's fiercest business rival, a man of power, of wealth, of undeniable magnetism, a man who had always looked at her in a way Nathan never had. He was dangerous, charismatic, unapologetically dominant, and unlike Nathan, he had never hidden his desire for her. Sarah swallowed, her heartbeat quickening. She had always felt his eyes on her, burning, intense, filled with something she could never quite name. It had unsettled her at first, but as the months passed, she had begun to crave that gaze. Because for the first time in her life, she had felt seen. Unlike Nathan, who dismissed her as if she were a ghost in his house, Lucas watched her as if she were something he wanted to claim, as if he was merely waiting for the right moment to take her. Sarah clenched her fists, forcing the thought away. She couldn't think about him, not now, not when she was still married. And yet, deep down, in the hidden depths of her heart, she knew the truth. She wanted to be wanted. She wanted to be craved. She wanted a man's touch. She wanted passion, love, fire. She wanted to feel alive. A sudden knock on the bedroom door jolted her from her thoughts, and her head snapped up. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned toward the door, waiting, wondering if, just this once, it might be Nathan. But she already knew the answer. She had stopped expecting him a long time ago. Instead, she remained frozen in place, lost in the reality of the life she had built for herself. A marriage without love, a husband who didn't care, a bed that had never been shared. But soon, very soon, that would all change, because fate had already decided her path. And the moment Lucas Blackwood set his sights on her, she would never be untouched again. Lucas Blackwood sat in his office, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the city skyline, but his thoughts were far from the dazzling lights. His mind was consumed by one name: Sarah Ellington. It had been 2 years since he had watched her walk down the aisle, 2 years since he'd clenched his fists and forced himself to smile while she pledged herself to another man. 2 years of restraint, of silence, of pretending he didn't care when in reality he'd wanted her more than anything. He had watched from a distance, suppressing the wildfire of obsession that burned inside him. He had respected her marriage, even when every fiber of his being had screamed at him to intervene. But now he knew the truth. Sarah wasn't loved. She wasn't cherished. She was untouched. And she was still within his reach. The thought sent a surge of possessiveness through him, dark and unrelenting. Nathan Ellington, the man who had the privilege of calling Sarah his wife, had never even touched her. Lucas had spent years controlling himself, burying his desire beneath layers of discipline. But the moment he learned that she was still as pure as the day he met her, something inside him snapped. Nathan had neglected her, and Lucas, he would worship her. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressing against his temples. The first time he had met Sarah, he had known she was different. It was at a charity gala, an event filled with the city's elite, where people masked their true selves behind expensive smiles and polished words. But Sarah had been real. Untainted by the arrogance and deception of the world around her, she had glowed, a quiet elegance surrounding her, making her stand out despite her simplicity. He had been drawn to her instantly. She had laughed softly at something a friend had said, and that sound had wrapped around him like a spell. Lucas had been a man who had everything: power, wealth, women who threw themselves at his feet. And yet he had never wanted anyone the way he had wanted Sarah that night. He had made his way toward her, intending to introduce himself, to claim a moment of her attention. But then Nathan had appeared. Lucas had watched as Sarah turned to Nathan with warmth in her eyes, her trust in him so complete that it made something bitter rise in Lucas's chest. He had clenched his fists, forced himself to look away, to remind himself that she was not his to have. She had made her choice. And Lucas had walked away. But now, 2 years later, he knew she had chosen wrong. Nathan had never been the man for her. If he had been, he wouldn't have ignored her, wouldn't have left her feeling unwanted, untouched, starved for love. And Lucas? He would have never let a single night pass without reminding her how much he wanted her. He exhaled sharply, his patience completely gone. He wasn't the kind of man who hesitated when he wanted something, and when it came to Sarah, he wanted her more than anything. He had tried to be noble, to be honorable, but his self-control had limits. He had stayed away long enough. He wouldn't let her slip away this time. Lucas pushed back his chair and stood, grabbing his suit jacket. His movements were controlled, but inside he was anything but calm. A storm raged within him, fierce and unrelenting. He had spent 2 years pretending he didn't want her, but now he was done pretending. Sarah was still within his reach, and this time he wouldn't let her go. His assistant looked up as he stepped out of his office, her expression startled at the intensity in his gaze. "Sir, your next meeting, cancel it," he said, his voice low and firm. "But Mr. Blackwood—" "Cancel everything," he ordered without stopping. Mia swallowed, nodding quickly as he strode past her. Lucas didn't care about meetings. He didn't care about anything except her. He had waited too long, and now he was going to claim her. Sarah had always tried to make things work. She had been raised to believe that marriage was sacred, that love could grow even in the most barren of circumstances. She had told herself that patience and kindness would eventually soften Nathan's cold heart. But after 2 years of trying, after countless nights lying awake beside a husband who barely acknowledged her presence, she'd begun to lose hope. She had felt like a stranger in her own home, a woman trapped in a marriage where love was nothing but a distant fantasy. And then, one evening, everything changed. Nathan had left his phone on the kitchen counter, something he never did. He was always so guarded, so private. But tonight, he had been careless. Sarah had never been the type to invade someone's privacy. But a strange feeling gnawed at her, an unease she couldn't ignore. Her fingers hesitated as she reached for the device, her heart pounding with an irrational fear. But the moment the screen lit up, revealing a string of unread messages, her world tilted on its axis. There were texts, dozens of them, messages from numbers she didn't recognize, names she had never heard before, and the words made her stomach churn. Last night was incredible. I can still feel you on me. When can I see you again? I miss the way you touch me. Don't forget our little secret. Your wife doesn't have to know. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she scrolled through the endless conversations, each one more damning than the last. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred with unshed tears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't just a mistake. Nathan had been cheating on her, repeatedly, shamelessly, without a hint of remorse. And suddenly everything made sense. The late nights at the office, the cold indifference, the way he recoiled from her touch as if the mere idea of intimacy with his own wife repulsed him. He had never wanted her, not even once. The phone slipped from her fingers, hitting the counter with a dull thud. Her heart pounded in her ears as she turned, her entire body shaking with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. She didn't know how long she stood there, paralyzed by the weight of betrayal. But when Nathan finally walked in, she barely recognized the man she had once called her husband. He looked at her with mild curiosity, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. "Why are you standing there like that?" His voice was devoid of concern, of warmth, of anything resembling affection. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat and lifted her chin, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How could you?" Her voice wavered, but there was an underlying steel beneath the pain. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was furious. Nathan arched a brow, his lips curling into a smirk that sent ice through her veins. "How could I? What?" He didn't even bother to feign innocence. He didn't care. Sarah felt her chest tighten. "I saw your phone, Nathan. I saw everything." The words tasted bitter on her tongue, but she forced them out, refusing to let herself crumble in front of him. Instead of guilt or regret, Nathan simply chuckled. The sound was hollow, cruel. Sarah's nails dug into her palms, her entire body trembling. "You lied to me. You betrayed me." Nathan exhaled, shaking his head as if she were nothing more than a foolish child. "Did you really think I married you for love?" The question hit her harder than any slap ever could. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. "What are you saying?" Nathan rolled his eyes, clearly bored with the conversation. "You were just an easy choice, Sarah. Beautiful, obedient, and convenient." The words sliced through her like a knife. She had spent 2 years trying to be a good wife, trying to earn his affection, and all along she had been nothing more than a convenience. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She refused to let him see how deeply he had wounded her. "Then why marry me at all?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was a quiet strength beneath the devastation. Nathan scoffed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Because my father wanted me to. Marrying you kept him happy, kept my inheritance secure. But you're nothing to me, Sarah." Nothing. Sarah inhaled sharply, her entire body numb with the weight of his cruelty. She had always known that Nathan didn't love her, but she had never imagined he was this heartless. She had been his wife for 2 years, and yet, in this moment, she realized she had never truly known the man she had married. Something inside her snapped. The tears that had threatened to fall never came. The pain that had once consumed her began to morph into something else, something stronger, something fiercer. She had spent too long living in the shadow of a loveless marriage, too long waiting for a man who had never even wanted her. But she wouldn't waste another second. That night, as she packed her bags, she made a decision. She would leave him, and she would never let another man make her feel unwanted again. The divorce happened quickly. There was no long, painful battle, no drawn-out legal fights, and certainly no desperate pleas from Nathan to reconsider. He signed the papers as easily as if they were just another document in his business empire, barely sparing her a glance, as if she had been nothing more than an insignificant chapter in his life that he was eager to close. No remorse, no guilt, just a cold, indifferent smirk as he handed them back to the lawyer. And in that moment, Sarah realized that the love she had tried so hard to find in her marriage had never existed, not even for a second. There was no heartbreak left inside her, only a deep, consuming emptiness, the kind that came from finally understanding that she had spent years fighting for something that had never been real. The moment she stepped out of the courthouse, the weight of her 2-year prison sentence lifted off her shoulders. But it didn't come with the sense of relief she had expected. Instead, there was an eerie silence within her, like standing in the eye of a storm, knowing that chaos would soon follow. She was free, yes, but free to do what? For so long, her life had been dictated by someone else's desires, someone else's rules, and now, for the first time, she had no one telling her what to do. The realization was as terrifying as it was liberating. The apartment she moved into was small, barely furnished, a far cry from the cold, extravagant mansion she had shared with Nathan, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every detail was chosen by her, a symbol of a life that was finally her own. Yet, despite this newfound independence, she felt lost. The silence of her new home was deafening, the emptiness a constant reminder that she had spent the last 2 years in a loveless marriage that had drained every ounce of warmth from her soul. She spent her days searching for jobs, scrolling through listings, sending applications, attending interviews, and every night she lay awake in her bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had made a mistake. Was this loneliness better than the cold indifference she had endured with Nathan? The answer should have been easy, but doubts crept into her mind like shadows, whispering fears she wasn't ready to confront. And then, just when she thought she would drown in uncertainty, he appeared, Lucas Blackwood. The first time she saw him again after her divorce was at a quiet cafe in the heart of the city. She had been sitting alone by the window, mindlessly stirring her coffee, lost in thoughts that led nowhere, when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up, and there he was, tall, commanding, with those piercing dark eyes that had always seemed to see through her. Lucas Blackwood had been a name she had only ever heard in business circles, a man whose reputation carried both admiration and fear. He was ruthless, powerful, and dangerously intelligent, and right now, every ounce of that intensity was focused on her. "I heard about the divorce," he said, his voice deep, smooth, yet edged with something unreadable. Sarah's breath caught for a moment. She had known of Lucas for years, had met him at social gatherings, but he had always been distant, always watching but never approaching. And now, here he was, sitting across from her, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "News travels fast, I guess," she murmured, trying to sound unaffected. But Lucas wasn't a man who entertained small talk. He wasn't here for polite conversation. He studied her, his dark eyes searching, as if he could see the battles she was fighting within herself. And then, without preamble, he said, "Come work for me, Sarah." She blinked. The offer was so unexpected, so sudden, that she almost thought she had misheard him. "Work for you," she echoed, her voice laced with hesitation. Lucas nodded, leaning back in his chair, completely at ease. Yet there was something in the way he watched her that made her pulse quicken. "You need a job. I need someone I can trust. It makes sense." Sarah hesitated. She had been looking for work, sending out applications, preparing for interviews, but something about this offer felt different, dangerous. Lucas Blackwood was not a man who made casual offers, and the way he was looking at her now, like she was something he had been waiting for, made her stomach twist in ways she couldn't quite explain. "I don't need saving," she said carefully, watching him for any sign of pity. Lucas's lips curled slightly, but it wasn't amusement. It was something darker. "Maybe not," he said, his voice dropping just enough to send a shiver through her. "But you need someone who actually sees you." Something shifted in the air between them, a charge that was impossible to ignore. Sarah's breath caught as he leaned forward, closing the distance just enough to make her aware of the sheer force of his presence. He was too close, too intense, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely seen. It was terrifying and exhilarating, because Lucas wasn't offering her sympathy. He wasn't offering her meaningless reassurances. He was offering her something more. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Lucas saw her, and he wasn't going to let her slip away. Working under Lucas was intoxicating in ways Sarah had never imagined. From the moment she stepped into his towering corporate empire, she felt the slow but undeniable shift in the air. Lucas Blackwood was not just a CEO. He was a force of nature, a man who commanded the world around him with effortless dominance. He didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His presence alone was enough to make rooms fall silent, enough to send a shiver down her spine whenever his gaze lingered on her for too long. And those gazes were never accidental. They were deliberate, piercing, full of something dark and unspoken that made her pulse race and her breath catch in her throat. She wasn't used to being wanted, at least not like this, not in a way that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something thrilling. Lucas watched her in a way Nathan never had, in a way that made her feel seen, unraveled, and completely at his mercy without him even touching her. At first, she thought she was imagining it, that maybe she was reading too much into the way his eyes darkened when she walked into a room, into the way his jaw clenched whenever another man so much as acknowledged her existence. But as the days passed, it became impossible to ignore. It was in the way he stood too close when they worked late into the night, in the way his fingers would graze her hand when passing documents, in the way his voice softened just for her. Lucas Blackwood was a man of control, but with her, that control seemed to slip, just enough for her to see the storm brewing beneath the surface, and it terrified her because she felt it too. The pull, the heat, the need. She had spent 2 years in a marriage that had left her untouched, longing for something she had never been given. And now, here was Lucas, offering her everything she had been denied, making her feel things she had no idea she was capable of feeling. It was dangerous. It was reckless. And yet she couldn't bring herself to stop it. Every interaction became a silent game, a test of how long they could resist the inevitable. And then, one evening, the game ended. It had been a long day, endless meetings, back-to-back calls, the kind of day that left her drained. The office was empty, the only sound the faint hum of city traffic outside. She was at her desk, going over the last of the financial reports when she felt it, his presence behind her, the quiet intensity of his gaze burning into her skin. She tried to ignore it, tried to pretend that she wasn't hyper-aware of every breath he took, of every movement he made. But then he spoke. His voice was quiet, deep, smooth as silk, but edged with something raw. "If I were your husband, I would have never ignored you." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Her fingers froze over the keyboard, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Slowly, she turned to face him, her breath catching as she met his gaze. He was leaning against his desk, his dark eyes locked onto hers, filled with something dangerous. Possession, hunger, a need that mirrored her own. "Lucas," she started, but he didn't let her finish. He pushed off the desk, closing the distance between them in slow, deliberate steps. When he stopped in front of her, he was so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of his cologne, dark woods, and something distinctly him. "Say my name again, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice rough, almost desperate. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was drowning in the intensity of his gaze, in the sheer want radiating from him. She should have stepped back. She should have put distance between them. But she didn't. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't want to run. She didn't want to be careful. She didn't want to be invisible. She wanted to feel. And Lucas Blackwood was more than willing to make her feel everything. It happened late at night, long after the rest of the office had emptied, leaving only the soft hum of the city outside and the faint flickering of the overhead lights. Sarah had been exhausted, mentally drained from the endless meetings, the long hours, the unrelenting pressure of working under the most powerful man she had ever known. And yet, despite her exhaustion, despite the weight of the day pressing down on her, she had found herself lingering, unable to leave, unable to shake the feeling that something was about to change. She had gathered her things, wrapped her coat around her shoulders, and made her way toward the elevator, fully expecting to walk out into the night and return to the quiet solitude of her empty apartment. But then, just as she reached the doors, she felt it, the warmth of a hand closing gently around her wrist, firm yet careful, as if the touch itself was a question, a plea. She froze, her breath hitching, her pulse racing wildly as she turned her head and found herself staring into the intense, darkened gaze of Lucas Blackwood. He said nothing at first, simply holding her there, his fingers wrapped around the delicate bones of her wrist, his thumb resting lightly against her skin, sending shivers through her entire body. The silence between them was heavy, thick with something unspoken, something undeniable. "Stay," he murmured, his voice low, rough, filled with a quiet intensity that sent a tremor through her. It wasn't a command, not really. It was something softer, something far more dangerous, a request laced with a need he could no longer contain. She should have pulled away. She should have stepped back, created distance, reminded herself that this was reckless, that she had barely begun to rebuild herself after the ruins of her marriage, that she had no business letting herself fall into the gravitational pull of this man who had been watching her, wanting her, waiting for her to see him. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Because the moment his fingers tightened just slightly, the moment his gaze darkened, the moment his free hand lifted and traced the soft curve of her jaw, she felt her resolve crack, splinter, crumble into dust. His touch was warm, searing, and when he tilted her chin up, guiding her face toward his, her lips parted instinctively, her breath uneven, her entire body trembling. She could see the battle waging in his eyes, the war between control and surrender, between restraint and possession. And then, finally, he lost. His lips crashed against hers, claiming, consuming, devouring. The force of it sent a shockwave through her, stole the breath from her lungs, set her veins on fire. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't hesitant, it was raw, desperate, the kind of kiss that spoke of years of longing, years of silence, years of wanting something he could never have. Until now. A soft sound escaped her, a quiet gasp swallowed by his mouth as he pulled her closer. eliminating the space between them, pressing her against the cool metal of the elevator doors. His hands were everywhere, cupping her face, sliding down the curve of her waist, anchoring her to him as if he was afraid she might disappear. And maybe she would have, if she had been in her right mind. But she wasn't. She was drowning in him, in the taste of him, in the scent of his cologne, in the way he kissed her like she was something precious and forbidden all at once. Her fingers curled into his shirt, gripping the fabric, holding on for dear life as he deepened the kiss, as his tongue slid against hers in a slow, deliberate stroke that sent a shudder through her entire body. She had never been kissed like this before, never been wanted like this before. Nathan had never touched her this way, never made her feel like she was everything, like she was the only thing that mattered. And that realization terrified her, because this wasn't just a kiss, it was a confession, a promise, a claim, and she had no idea if she was ready for it. Lucas took her to his penthouse, a place she had never seen before, but somehow it felt like stepping into a world that had been waiting for her. The moment they stepped inside, the air between them thickened, charged with something neither of them could suppress any longer. The city lights poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow across the sleek, modern space. But Sarah barely noticed any of it. Her pulse pounded in her ears, her breath uneven as she turned to face him. Lucas stood before her, his broad shoulders tense, his dark eyes unreadable, filled with something raw, something she wasn't sure she could name. Desire, possession, restraint. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough, thick with an emotion that made her stomach twist, her entire body shiver, not with fear, but with want. Want for him, want for this, want for everything he made her feel. Her past had been cold, barren, untouched by passion, but Lucas was heat, fire, intensity, a man who made her feel alive in a way she never had before. She trembled under his gaze, but not from hesitation. She had never been more sure of anything in her life. "I've never been more sure," she whispered, and the second the words left her lips, the restraint in his eyes shattered. In one swift movement, he closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face as he captured her lips in a kiss that stole the air from her lungs. It was deep, consuming, desperate. His lips moved against hers with a hunger that sent a fire through her veins, his hands sliding down her back, pulling her closer until there was nothing between them, no space, no doubt, nothing but him. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her deeper into the penthouse, his mouth never leaving hers as he laid her down against the cool silk of his bed. The contrast sent a shiver through her, but it was nothing compared to the way he looked at her in that moment, like she was everything, like he'd been waiting for this moment for longer than he wanted to admit. He took his time, his hands moving slowly, reverently, as if he was memorizing every inch of her, as if he was replacing every painful memory she had ever known with the warmth of his touch. His lips trailed down her neck, lingering at the pulse point where her heartbeat raced for him. A silent confession she couldn't put into words. Every kiss, every touch, every slow, deliberate movement unraveled her piece by piece until she was lost in him, in the way he made her feel. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only need. And when she finally gave herself to him, it wasn't just physical. It was deeper, more profound, something that felt like surrender and belonging all at once. He made love to her like she was precious, like she was meant to be his, like she had always been his. He whispered her name against her skin, told her she was beautiful, told her she was wanted, worshipped her with his hands, his lips, his body, until she had forgotten everything but him. Until there was no past, No pain, no ghosts of the life she had left behind. Only Lucas, only this moment, only the way he owned her. Not as an obligation, but as his. Lucas became possessive, his hunger for Sarah evolving into something far deeper, something raw and consuming, something that bordered on obsession, and from the moment he had claimed her as his, he refused to let her forget it. The morning after their first night together, she woke to find his gaze already on her, dark, intense, filled with an unreadable emotion that sent a shiver coursing through her. She had expected awkwardness, uncertainty, maybe even regret, but what she saw in his eyes was something entirely different. Ownership, possession, a silent vow that she would never again belong to anyone but him. The air between them was thick, heavy with something unspoken, and as she lay there beneath the silk sheets, her body still aching from the way he had worshipped her the night before, she felt the weight of his words before he even spoke them. "You're mine now, Sarah," he murmured, his voice rough, filled with a quiet authority that made her heart stutter, her breath hitch. "No one else touches you. No one else even looks at you." His fingers traced along the bare skin of her arm, slow, deliberate, as if he was memorizing every inch of her, as if he wanted to carve himself into her very soul, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. A shiver ran through her, not from fear, but from something deeper, something dark and thrilling, because she wanted this. She wanted to be his, wanted to belong to him in a way that no one else ever had. But the intensity of it, the depth of his claim, left her trembling beneath his touch. She had spent years feeling unwanted, invisible, untouched by love or passion, and now here was Lucas, a man who didn't just want her, he needed her, craved her with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. And Sarah, who had spent so long being overlooked, found herself drowning in the depth of his obsession, unsure if she would ever be able to come up for air. But the truth was, she didn't want anyone else. No one had ever made her feel the way Lucas did. No one had ever looked at her the way he did, like she was everything, like she was the most precious thing in his world. And maybe that should have scared her. Maybe she should have questioned the way he devoured her with his eyes, the way he touched her as if he was afraid she might disappear, the way his voice darkened whenever another man so much as glanced in her direction. But she didn't question it. She relished it. Because after everything she'd been through, after 2 years in a marriage where she had been nothing more than a ghost, there was something intoxicating about being seen, truly seen. Lucas kissed her then, slow and deep, his fingers tangling in her hair, his body pressing her into the mattress as if he needed to feel her, to remind himself that she was real, that she was his. And when he pulled back, his gaze locked onto hers, filled with something dark, something dangerous. "Say it," he demanded, his voice low, a quiet growl of possession. "Tell me you're mine." Her heart pounded, the heat of his words igniting something reckless inside her, something primal and wild, something she had never felt before. "I'm yours," she whispered, and the second the words left her lips, something inside him snapped. He moved with a desperation that stole the air from her lungs, his hands gripping her hips, pulling her beneath him as his mouth claimed hers, in a kiss that sent a fire raging through her veins. There was no hesitation, no restraint, only need, a hunger so intense it left her trembling, aching, burning for him. And when he took her again, it wasn't just about desire, it was about ownership, about staking his claim so deeply that no other man would ever be able to touch her without feeling the ghost of his hands, his lips, his love. He was relentless, worshipping her with his body, his touch, his whispered words of possession, until she was gasping his name, until there was nothing left of her but him. And when it was over, when she lay beneath him, her body spent, her heart racing, her mind spinning from the force of what had just happened between them, he didn't let her go. He didn't roll away or put distance between them. Instead, he pulled her closer, wrapping himself around her as if he was afraid she might slip through his fingers. His lips brushed against her temple, his breath warm against her skin as he murmured, "I don't share, Sarah. I never will." His words sent a shiver down her spine, because she knew he meant them. Lucas Blackwood was not a man who took love lightly. He was not a man who loved softly. He was a man who consumed, who owned, who claimed what was his and never let go. And as she lay in his arms, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't sure if she wanted him to let her go. Nathan had always been a man who believed he could walk away from anything without regret. But standing there now, watching Sarah with another man, he felt something foreign claw at his insides. Jealousy, raw and burning. It was an emotion he had never associated with her before. When they were married, he had taken her presence for granted, convinced that she would always be there, always be his. But now she wasn't. She was standing next to Lucas Sinclair, a man who looked at her with a quiet possessiveness that set Nathan's teeth on edge. Nathan's lips curled into a sneer as he crossed his arms over his chest, stepping closer, invading their space. His sharp, assessing eyes swept over Sarah, noting how she stood beside Lucas with an ease she had never shown around him. It grated on his nerves. "You moved on too fast," he drawled, voice laced with mockery, though deep down he hated the words as soon as they left his mouth. Sarah stiffened at the accusation, her fingers involuntarily curling into the fabric of her dress. Lucas, however, showed no reaction other than a slight tightening of his jaw. His eyes darkened, cold as steel as he regarded Nathan with silent challenge. "She's none of your concern," Lucas said, his voice deceptively calm, but carrying an undercurrent of warning. But Nathan only smirked. He could sense the possessiveness rolling off Lucas in waves, and he wanted to provoke him, to see just how deep this man's claim on Sarah went. "Does he know, Sarah?" Nathan's voice dripped with amusement, but his eyes held something darker. "Does he know you were a virgin when we divorced?" Sarah paled instantly, her breath hitching. The air around them turned charged, tense with unspoken emotions. Her gaze flickered to Lucas, uncertain of what his reaction would be. Would he care? Would he see it as a stain on her past, something to hold against her? Lucas, however, did not react the way she feared. He did not look at her with doubt or betrayal. Instead, his lips curved into a smirk, one that held nothing but pure, unshakable confidence. His eyes locked onto Nathan's, his expression unreadable, but his next word sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "That just means she was always meant to be mine," Lucas murmured, his voice smooth, his certainty absolute. Nathan's smirk faltered for the first time. He hadn't expected that response. He had wanted to get under Lucas's skin, to make him doubt Sarah, to make him feel like he had taken something Nathan had left behind. But instead, Lucas looked at Sarah like she was the most precious thing in the world, as if her past only solidified his claim over her. Before Nathan could recover, before he could spit out another taunt, Lucas acted. In one swift, fluid motion, Lucas turned to Sarah, grasped her waist, and pulled her against him with undeniable possession. And then, in front of Nathan, in front of anyone who might be watching, he crushed his lips against hers in a kiss so deep, so searing, that Sarah forgot how to breathe. The world around them faded. The only thing that existed was Lucas, his firm hands, his demanding lips, his overwhelming presence that engulfed her completely. The kiss was not just a display of dominance, not just a warning to Nathan. It was a declaration, a claim, a promise. It was Lucas telling her, telling everyone that she was his and his alone. Sarah melted into him, her hands instinctively gripping his shirt as her body responded to his heat. Every inch of her surrendered to his touch, to his lips, to the way he kissed her like he was branding himself onto her soul. She had never been kissed like this before, never been wanted with such intensity that it made her head spin. Nathan, standing just a few feet away, clenched his fists. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The jealousy inside him twisted into something uglier, something more painful. He had never kissed Sarah like that, had never held her like she was his entire world. And now, someone else did. Lucas finally pulled back, his forehead resting against Sarah's as he whispered, "You're mine, Sarah. No one else matters." Sarah's heart pounded, her fingers trembling as she held onto him. She should have been embarrassed, but she wasn't. She didn't care that Nathan had seen. She didn't care about anything except the man in front of her, the man who had just silenced every doubt, every fear, with a single kiss. Lucas turned his gaze back to Nathan, his expression impassive, his tone utterly dismissive. "Walk away, Nathan. You lost her, and I won't let you forget it." Nathan stared at them for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes dark, with something unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away. But the sting of his loss followed him. Lucas had always been a man who knew what he wanted, and what he wanted more than anything in this world was her. Sarah wasn't just another passing moment in his life, a fleeting love that would fade with time. No, she was the very essence of everything he had ever dreamed of, the one thing he never knew he needed until she had walked back into his life. And now, as he watched her sitting on the balcony of his penthouse, bathed in the golden glow of the city lights, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would never let her go. Sarah sat with her knees drawn up to her chest, the soft wind tousling her hair as she gazed at the breathtaking skyline. The city was alive, vibrant, yet she felt a strange sense of quiet peace whenever she was with Lucas. He had this way of making her feel safe, of making her forget the past that had haunted her for so long. But could she truly belong to him? Could she give herself to him without hesitation, without fear? Lucas stepped behind her, his strong arms wrapping around her shoulders as he pressed a kiss against the crown of her head. "You're thinking too much," he murmured, his voice a deep, soothing caress. Sarah let out a soft, breathy laugh, tilting her head against his chest. "Maybe." Lucas pulled her up gently, turning her to face him. His eyes were dark, intense, filled with something so deep and consuming that it sent a shiver down her spine. He reached for her hands, lacing his fingers through hers, holding on as if he never wanted to let go. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer now, more serious. "Marry me." Sarah's breath caught. Her heart pounded violently in her chest as she stared up at him, wide-eyed. "Lucas." But he didn't let her finish. His grip on her hands tightened, his voice filled with unshakable certainty. "I won't lose you, Sarah, not to your past, not to your fears. I want every part of you, your love, your laughter, your pain. I want to be the man who holds you when you're scared, the man who kisses away your tears. I don't want just a piece of you, Sarah. I want all of you. Be mine forever." Tears welled in her eyes, her heart twisting with emotions too overwhelming to contain. This wasn't just a proposal. It was everything. It was the ultimate claim of a man who loved her beyond reason, a man who had waited for her and only her. She had spent so long running from love, so long fearing that she would never be enough, that she would never be truly wanted. But Lucas had shattered every doubt, every hesitation, and all that was left was this moment. She wanted forever too, and she wanted it with him. The day had finally arrived, not as a duty, not as an obligation, but as the purest, most powerful choice of love. Sarah stood before the grand mirror in her bridal suite, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling slightly as they clutched the delicate lace of her wedding dress. The gown was exquisite, every stitch a masterpiece, but it was not the fabric, the pearls, or the intricate embroidery that made it beautiful. It was what it represented, a new beginning, a life chosen, not forced, a love so profound, so deep, that it had transformed every fear, every hesitation into something precious, something unbreakable. She had walked down this path before, in another time, another life, where love had been a distant dream, overshadowed by duty and expectation. But today, as she prepared to walk down the aisle once more, it was different. This time, she wasn't marrying because she had to. She was marrying because she wanted to. Because she loved Lucas Sinclair with every beat of her heart, every breath in her lungs, every piece of her soul. The room buzzed with excitement, the soft chatter of bridesmaids and family members filling the air, but Sarah barely heard them. Her thoughts were consumed by him, by the man waiting for her at the end of the aisle, the man who had shown her what it meant to be truly loved. Lucas had never given up on her, never wavered in his devotion, even when she'd been too afraid to accept the depth of what they shared. He had claimed her with his kisses, with his touch, with every whispered vow before this moment. But today would make it real, forever. She turned slightly, meeting her reflection in the mirror, and for the first time in years she saw a woman who was happy, not just content, not just surviving, but truly, deeply happy. Love had done that. Lucas had done that. A gentle knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts, and when it opened, she saw her closest friend smiling at her, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "It's time," she whispered, voice full of emotion. Sarah inhaled shakily, pressing a hand to her fluttering heart before nodding. She turned, taking one last look at the room, at the life she was leaving behind, before stepping forward into the future that awaited her. The walk down the aisle felt surreal, each step bringing her closer to him, to the only man who had ever made her feel like she was enough. As the grand double doors opened, a hush fell over the guests, and the moment her eyes found Lucas, everything else faded. He stood at the altar, dressed in an immaculate black suit, his broad shoulders strong, his presence commanding, but it wasn't his tailored perfection that made her breath catch. It was the way he looked at her, as if she was the only thing that had ever mattered. As if the entire world had ceased to exist the second she stepped into the room. There was reverence in his gaze, raw and unfiltered, a love so overwhelming that it stole the air from her lungs. Sarah's hands tightened around her bouquet as her steps quickened, drawn to him, to the man who had claimed every part of her heart without ever needing to ask. When she finally reached him, Lucas extended his hand, his grip strong, steady, possessive. She felt the warmth of his touch seep into her skin, grounding her, anchoring her in this moment. And when he whispered, "You're breathtaking," she nearly lost herself in the sheer depth of emotion in his voice. The ceremony passed in a blur of whispered vows and promises. But one moment stood still, the kiss. The moment when Lucas took her face between his hands, his touch gentle yet firm, his thumb caressing her cheek as if she was the most precious thing in existence. And then, in front of everyone, he lowered his lips to hers, sealing their love in a kiss that wasn't just passion, wasn't just devotion. It was a claim, a vow that she would never feel unwanted again. Lucas had always been an intense man. He never did anything halfway, never settled for anything less than perfection, and when it came to Sarah, that obsession reached its peak. She was his everything, the woman who consumed his thoughts, his desires, his every waking moment. And now, after making her his wife, after sealing their love in vows that would last a lifetime, Lucas knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never let the fire between them fade. Not tonight. Not ever. Their honeymoon suite was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, the air thick with the scent of roses and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. The private villa, nestled on an island paradise, was secluded from the rest of the world, just how Lucas wanted it, because tonight wasn't about anything or anyone else. Tonight was about her, about them, about the passion that had burned between them since the moment their paths had crossed again, a passion so deep, so unbreakable, that even time itself couldn't diminish it. Sarah stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the moonlight casting a silken glow over her skin, making her look almost ethereal. Her wedding dress had long been replaced by something delicate, something sinful, and Lucas's breath caught as he watched her. His wife, his woman, his obsession. He stalked toward her, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. But Sarah wasn't prey. She was the force that had unraveled him, the only person who had ever made him feel completely undone. His fingers trailed up her bare arm, igniting goosebumps in their wake, before he turned her to face him, his dark eyes locking onto hers. There was something primal in his gaze, something that sent shivers down her spine. But there was love, too, a love so consuming that it left her breathless. "You're mine," Lucas murmured, his voice rough, filled with undeniable possession. "And I'll spend every night for the rest of our lives proving it to you." Sarah's breath hitched, her lips parting, but before she could utter a single word, Lucas captured her mouth in a kiss that was nothing short of worship. He kissed her the way a man kissed the only woman he would ever love, the only woman he would ever need, deeply, desperately, with a hunger that would never be satisfied. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her toward the massive bed, their lips never breaking apart. And when he laid her down, his body hovering over hers, his touch reverent yet demanding, Sarah knew one thing with absolute certainty: Lucas Sinclair would never stop loving her like this. Because with him, the passion would never fade. Their life together was not just a marriage, it was a symphony of love, devotion, and unwavering passion that never dulled with time. Lucas had vowed to love Sarah, to cherish her, to make her feel wanted in a way she never had before, and he had kept that promise every single day. From the moment they had exchanged vows, from the second he had slipped that ring onto her finger, he had made it his mission to ensure that she never spent another moment questioning her worth. And she never did, because Lucas Sinclair never let her forget how much she meant to him. Their days were filled with laughter, with stolen kisses in the morning light, with whispers of devotion in the quiet hours of the night. No matter how busy he was, no matter how much the world demanded of him as CEO, he always made time for her because she was his priority. Lucas was relentless in his love. It was in the way he pulled her close when she stirred in her sleep, in the way his hand never failed to find hers in a crowded room, in the way he looked at her as if she was the very air he breathed. And Sarah flourished under his love. The woman who had once doubted herself, who had once questioned whether she was truly enough, now knew she was everything to him, and she believed it. Their home was filled with warmth, with nights spent wrapped in each other's arms, with mornings where Lucas refused to let her out of bed because he needed just 5 more minutes of holding her. He worshipped her, not just in the moments of passion, but in the quiet, everyday gestures, The way he brought her coffee exactly the way she liked it, the way he memorized every little thing that made her smile, the way he made sure she never doubted how deeply, how endlessly he adored her. Years passed, but the fire never faded. If anything, it burned brighter, because with Lucas, love was not something that weakened with time. It only grew stronger. And Sarah, she had never been more certain of anything in her life. Lucas had always told her she belonged to him. From the moment he had claimed her with his relentless love, from the second he had pulled her into his world with an obsession so deep, so unchanging, that it felt as if the universe had written their fates together long before they had even known each other. And now, as Sarah lay in his arms, surrounded by the warmth of their love, by the life they had built, she knew with absolute certainty that he had been right all along. She had been meant for him. Always, long before she had realized it herself. The truth was etched into the way he held her, his arms wrapped around her as if he would never let go, as if she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. It was in the way he breathed her in, his lips pressed against her hair, his fingers tracing slow, lazy patterns along her skin. Even after all these years, it was in the way he still looked at her, with awe, with hunger, with a devotion so powerful that it stole the very air from her lungs. There had never been anyone else for him. There never would be. The world outside their bedroom was quiet, the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the windows, casting golden shadows over their entwined bodies. The night was still, but inside, within the sanctuary of Lucas's embrace, everything was alive. The love between them had never faded, never wavered, never once lost its intensity. If anything, time had only made it stronger, more consuming, more undeniable. There was nothing in this world Lucas wouldn't do for her, no distance he wouldn't cross, no battle he wouldn't fight, if it meant keeping her safe, keeping her happy, keeping her his. He had built an empire, had conquered everything in his path with ruthless determination, but she, Sarah, was his greatest victory, his most treasured possession, the only thing he'd ever truly needed. As she lay against him, her head resting over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm of his pulse beneath her cheek, she let her fingers trail over his chest, memorizing every inch of him as if she hadn't done it 1,000 times before. She felt the way his muscles tensed slightly under her touch, the way his breath hitched, and it sent a shiver down her spine, because even now, even after all this time, she still affected him just as much as she had that first night. "You were always meant to be mine, sweetheart," Lucas murmured, his voice thick with undeniable certainty, his lips grazing her temple, his hold on her tightening ever so slightly. There was something possessive in the way he said it, something that made her chest tighten with overwhelming emotion. Because she was. She had always been meant for him, just as he had always been meant for her. No amount of time, no force in this world could have changed that. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words settle deep within her soul. She had spent so long searching for where she belonged, for a place that felt like home, and now she realized she had found it, not in a house, not in a city, not in the life they had built, but in him. Lucas Sinclair was her home, her heart, her forever, and as she lay there, wrapped in the arms of the only man she would ever love, she knew she had never been more certain of anything in her life